Guys, welcome to another episode of Wisdom and Wealth. I'm here with John Huffman, who is a friend of mine who we actually play basketball together and I like talking trash to.
Oh my gosh.
And he calls fouls like a baby sometimes.
Okay, Cory Procter is a giant person. He's the size of a grizzly bear. Okay, so how long have we been playing together? At least 5 or 6 years.
Something like that.
Okay,
It's
so
weird.
when you started, you were obviously a professional athlete, freak of an athlete, better athlete than anybody else on the, but like your basketball skills were raw. But what's frustrating,
the least.
but what's frustrating is you have learned how to play basketball too now. As I'm like, okay, this is not quite fair.
Dude, I remember everybody getting frustrated. They start laughing because I would do something and I'm like, what? They're like, you can't do that. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I thought this was a pickup game, not normal ball. Like this is like schoolyard rules, man.
Yeah,
Junkyard.
Where are the refs? What are we doing here?
There's nobody refs, no whistles here.
Well, your athleticism, you were dominant just from day one, but most of all, what I love about that game is it's just a bunch of good dudes hanging out, getting exercise, and getting competition. That's super fun.
Oh, that's the best part about it. I don't want to go run and jog. I am not a jogger. This is not me. Okay.
Could you imagine
Yeah.
jogging for fun? Like nothing's chasing me.
Nothing. Yeah, seriously.
Why would I run?
I go. That's what somebody says. I'm like, they were like, well, let's go do a 3 mile or 5K or something. I don't want to do that. If the guy steals my wife's purse, he better get away in the first 100 yards. If he's got it, then God bless him. Okay, but if I'm going to get him, it's that distance.
That's it.
That's before I die.
That's right. That's right. You make it a quarter mile down the road. Okay, you earned it, sir. Tip of the hat.
Seriously, you got it. You were in shape better than me. Okay, well, I want to jump into this. So we were talking before we got on here, and obviously this is a podcast about entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship, and we're talking about balancing families and business. And you're an interesting story because it's not just balancing a business, but you got in the political realm too. But what I'd like to start before that, you have a renovation company, and so like what the context that came to have kind of like the business, the political realm, and then obviously like let's keep our family intact.
Yeah.
Like start with the context before all that.
Sure.
Like what led to you today being all those things?
Yeah. I mean, great question. So, we have a construction company. We've owned it for almost 10 years now, believe it or not. But local company, we do residential renovation and construction. And at the same time, as you mentioned, I've been in local politics. I had the great honor of serving on Southlake City Council, and then for the last 3 years as Southlake Mayor, where I rolled off about a year ago. And so, to your point, it's been a challenge juggling all those things. But it's not really a path I saw myself taking. I think like most entrepreneurs, you can't look back and say, "Oh, this is exactly how I planned this out," for a lot of reasons. One of which is I think the mindset that leads you to entrepreneurship makes you nimble and flexible and willing and able to pivot if you need to, right? You got to make it work. Yeah. There's no path that's laid out for you. You got to make it work. So, but I started, so I went to Texas A&M, actually went to law school at Georgetown up in Washington, D.C. So I'm a lawyer by training, and came back to DFW, moved to Southlake, and started working for a big law firm. And actually had a great time. It wasn't bad work, but as I was coming up on partnership, it was just like wasn't something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life, or I always felt like a desire to be more entrepreneurial, kind of to bet on myself and see how I did. And so I ended up going in-house with a construction company. And then a year or so later, a year and a half, my wife and I were talking about this, just kind of the drive to have our own deal. And so we said, you know what, let's start a construction company. How hard could it be? And I think, again, similar to most entrepreneurs, you're glad you didn't know what you didn't know, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Seriously. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, we kind of jumped in with both feet. I was on city council at the time. So, it was fun. My kids are now 18, 16, and 14. So, rewind 10 years. They're in the the really hands-on, parenting. They're not toddlers. They're not quite, self-sufficient teenagers. So this is really hands-on. And actually my wife is homeschooling. We had just started homeschooling. So new business, really brand new into city council, homeschooling. So it was all hands on deck.
All at once.
All at once.
Yeah.
All at once. But I will say a huge part of it was sort of approaching all of those different activities and interests in as a family, right?
Yeah.
So we always approach the politics as a family. The kids have been drug around to so many different, speeches and campaign events, and same with the business. Elizabeth was my original business partner. She didn't work in the business anymore much, but she was, it was always a package deal, right? Yeah. So we just sort of approached everything as a family and threw it all in there and said, hey, we're going to try to make this work.
Dude, that's awesome.
It was fun.
Well, so, okay, start the business. It was all you guys at the very beginning, but take me on the path. Like, where are you today, and what has been the growth like since starting that thing? Because it's not easy and everybody's got a little different path.
Yeah.
Right. But what's it been like so far?
Well, it's been great. It's very, construction is I would say a crowded space, but there's not a lot of barriers to entry to becoming a GC or doing renovation or new builds. And so once you get in, it's like anything else, you're sort of figuring it out, but so much of it is about personal branding, right? Yeah. Making sure you're out there and people are seeing kind of what you're about in more than just the business. So like what you're doing here, it's people get a picture of you through these podcasts and hear how authentic you are and how you think, and they come to trust you, which, that's the cornerstone of any business relationship is trust.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we, what we worked on in the early days. It was just, we were selling based on trust, because as it turns out, I didn't know anything about construction. And I'm very thankful for our early clients, because they probably knew that.
Yeah.
And just trusted us anyway. We actually had a really interesting opportunity early on. So this was 2016, and it was at the height of all the HGTV, Chip and Joanna Gaines type stuff.
Nice.
And so we would get random emails from people saying, "Oh, I'm a production company. I want to, I'm filming the next HGTV show, blah, blah, blah." So
really?
we get that stuff all the time, because husband and wife renovation, right? It was that was the thing. But I don't know, I still don't know why, but one of us answered one of those emails and started going back and forth. And it turns out this person was they cold call a lot of people, but this person was a legit producer, right? And so one thing led to another. We did some Zoom calls, or it was probably Skype at the time. And they were like, "We actually kind of like you guys. We want to film what they called a sizzle reel."
I thought you were going to be a jerk at first, but you're not bad.
Yeah. You're okay.
I love how people say that sometimes.
Yeah, right. Thanks. I think. Okay.
They do that. They always assume like the worst.
Right. Right. I'm glad I met your expectations or exceeded them.
Yeah. Thank you, I guess.
Yeah. Well, they're from New York, so
Yeah.
Texas.
Anyway.
But so we ended up, they flew down and they shot for 3 or 4 days, a sizzle reel. HGTV liked it so much they bought a pilot and flew a crew down over 8 weeks, 10 weeks, and filmed a pilot episode for what would have been a show for us. Pilot ended up airing a couple of times to good ratings, but we got a call maybe 6 months after it aired saying, "Hey, we're not interested in any more married couple flip shows." I'm like, okay, you could have told us that a year ago, but
seriously.
All right, all good. But it was super fun. It was great. It was great for the brand. There was a lot of, we did, watch parties and all that. It was just fun. It was a fun experience. So, after that, we grew, we've been through different growth cycles, and we've been, employee count's been up and down, but it's a really wonderful community to do business in.
Yeah.
Being in Southlake and being a local based business, there's so much support from the community, and there's so much support from other entrepreneurs. So that's been the most fun part of the journey, I think, is just being here, having a local business and being involved in the community in that way is just, we've loved it.
Well, so go into that. So I've seen 2 different sides of the community. So like me having the business here, I've seen an awesome side And I'll tell you, like one time I paid for leads. I'll never do it again.
Really?
Yeah, I'll never do it again. I got the most snooty, uptight room of people, and plate lickers, we call them, right? But like people just wanted a free meal, free advice, free service, free anything they could get.
Interesting.
And it's funny because I tell people too that we're like they're trying to build their business or trying to get established or build their wealth or whatever. I'm like, look, there's rich jerks too. I'm like, don't get out of whack. But I saw two sides of the community, but there's also, so you'll get that everywhere you go. But like in Southlake, there's also a high bar that you have to meet for people. And so talk about that, especially when you're getting into politics. You got the business, you're getting into politics, you're under a microscope, especially for that. And we had some national news hit in our community, right?
That's right.
That was pretty crazy. I'm like, how was handling the spotlight there for, I guess this is hyper focused, and I'm used to it from the sports background from people like, I mean, if anybody saw my poster, we actually did a newsletter and I shared the story about the YouTube video guy was Cory Procter Must Die. And
oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, this was legit when I was playing for the Cowboys. And I'm like, what the heck? You know, it was legit a guy in his basement. And I'm like, this is the wildest stuff in the world. So I'm used to like heavy criticism and having to handle that, right? But for anybody else who maybe it doesn't have a level, like you got to condition yourself to that, or like even could you speak to that and how did it felt? How'd you deal with it? How did you manage that with the family?
Yeah,
because it's a lot to see somebody you love get attacked. On stuff.
Boy, ain't that the truth?
I mean.
Yeah, you know that's interesting because you have a very similar dynamic coming from athletics, and the weirdest part for me, and I wonder if you felt the same way, was people that you don't know and do not know you have a very strong opinion about you.
Yeah,
like, and especially when those opinions are negative, I'm like, okay, there are people in my life that I have earned negative emotion from. I did something to you. I offended you. I wronged you. I earned that. Okay. I get it. Yeah. But then others is like, you really don't like me. And I don't know why. You don't know me.
Yeah.
You're like, you might like me if you knew me. Like,
you're at the rival high school.
Yeah,
that's basically what he equates to, right?
Wearing the wrong team's jersey. That's right. So that's always been, it's tough to get used to. Like, you not being hated or being heavily criticized or whatever for stuff that are by people you don't know and don't know you, and for stuff that you feel like, you're doing the best you can. Obviously, you out there on the field, if you make a mistake, it's like, guys, as it turns out, wasn't trying to make a mistake.
Yeah.
Like, we're all doing our best out here. Same here. I'm like, okay, well, I'm trying to make the best decision I can for the city. And if you disagree, I get it. But like, just understand the intention is not to like screw you or make you mad. Right. So, but no, the family, it was the hardest, that side of it was the hardest thing on the family. But it got to the point where, and I think most political people would tell you this, like the faceless criticism is, okay. Like you kind of, it rolls off your back. What's hard is when it gets close to home and personal. And then, politics is pretty dirty. It can be pretty dirty. And when
I went to your kid's program, Donnie, keep your mouth shut.
Honestly,
like the close ones.
Yeah. It's like, wait a minute. Like, I thought we were friends and this is not, there's a lot of betrayal hurts. And, when you get that and it gets personal, that's hard to kind of just let roll off your back. But yeah, I mean, balancing the politics and the business has been challenging. Again, partially because everyone has an opinion about you. Yeah. Like in my business, our average job size is rather large. Like, we're doing big jobs. And so it's a long sales process, and there's a lot of, it's a lot of trust, right? It's a relationship that you're building.
Yeah.
So be similar to you and your clients. And sometimes it's easier to go in to a situation where there's not a preconceived notion about who you are or what you do, right? Obviously, you want them to feel good about your brand and good about what you can do, or they wouldn't be calling you, right? But it's a challenge when everyone has an opinion, or a lot of people have an opinion. I'm not sitting here saying everybody, I'm the mayor, right?
Yeah.
It's not like a universal name ID, but like there's a lot of people that know who we are and positive or negative have feelings about us. So that's been a challenge. Also just in the sense that when you're mayor, like early on when I was just on council and starting the business, so much of the energy I put into like my public brand was related to the business because we're trying to get it going. So I wanted people to think about the business when they thought about me or Elizabeth, right? Well, once I became mayor, that shifted, and all of my energy, in my public brand was around the mayor thing because that's what I had to do to be effective, right? And so that did hurt the business. I think looking back on it, and I tell you, like dozens of times I would have conversations with people and sometimes it was just like, hey, like you're not still doing the renovation, or I'd mention the business and be like, oh, are you still doing that?
Oh. They just assumed you stopped.
Yeah. Just assume mayor is a full-time job or you got paid. I'm like, yeah, not mayor's a volunteer role. I got to feed my family.
Yeah. Sure.
So, which is fine. I mean, you don't know, right? If you don't know, you don't know. And so that's been a challenge, is now that stepping away from mayor, it's been about a year, but just getting back into the business and making sure my energy is going that direction again.
Yeah.
But it's just another, a twist and turn on the path, and we're having a ton of fun with it.
Man, it's interesting because, I get, and you, especially being mayor, or honestly, anybody who has like a breath of money tries to get recruited and sold to in every direction. But, I've gotten so much from playing ball, and it's not like I was a high star athlete or anything, but I was just here long enough for somebody to recognize my name. That was it.
You were a professional athlete. That's you don't get much higher than that.
Well, I always thought it was funny. Like when I'd roll through the drive-through at Whataburger, and the guy's like, "Hey, man." I'm like, "Hey, man, what's going on?"
Hey, buddy.
He's like, "What are you doing now?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You're Cory Procter, right? You played football for the Cowboys." And I'm like, you know who I am right now? I'm like, while I'm ordering a triple with cheese. But what the heck? I didn't even remember what I was getting.
No,
it's
different. It's like, and I'm sure you felt the same way, but you forget that you always have to be on.
Yeah.
A little bit, not always, right? I mean, people want authenticity, but like there is some level of like, I'm still getting recognized, I got.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I was thinking about though was, we get recruited. I mean, how many times you gotten recruited into an MLM of some sort, and you're like, "No, I'm good." And it's always the same mark. You're like, "You wouldn't have to do anything. Yeah. You wouldn't have to work." I'm like, "No, anything worth it takes work, right?"
That's right.
And but for me, I always thought about it in this respect, is like as I was kind of walking through when I started the business, or like even before that, when I was trying to chew through like what path I was supposed to be going on, and then this started developing, which is developed into something awesome. But what I really had to focus on was I was like, well, people are only going to remember you for one or two things, right? And so obviously they're going to remember how you make them feel. We know that lesson. But I mean, if you sit here and water, and I'll give you an example. I shared this not too long ago. I met an attorney, and I remember this lady. I was like, "Well, what kind of law do you practice?" And she rattled off like 6 different types of law. And I'm like, "Whoa, okay, I'm not interested anymore." Like I asked you one question, and you just gave me a bucket list of answers. And
interesting.
And so, anyways, what I remember like trying to be protective of that, not just of my relationships, but of my personal brand, and knowing that people were going to remember me for football.
Yep.
That's just a given. But what was the other thing that they were going to know me for? And now, me as a believer, I want them to have an emotion or lead down a road where they want to ask me about that. But especially for the business, is if I'm going to be this entrepreneurial role, like you got to remember me for the business.
No doubt.
And that was it. That's all. And so that became essentially the label was, hey, this former NFL guy who owns a wealth management company now.
Yep.
And which is what I wanted.
That's
and
right.
So it was funny because anytime anybody like started veering away from that, I actually just corrected them. And they're like, "Oh no, I didn't realize." Yeah. Well, now you know. So
Yeah.
that was it.
No, that's so. It's you being intentional about that makes a huge difference, right? I mean, because you have to be. You're right. You don't want to be the jack of all trades and master of none. That's not where you add value, especially when you're in Southlake and pitching yourself to a lot of folks who are high achievers and very demanding in their service providers. So yeah, no, you're 100% right. It's like, hey, this is what I do. And I'm good at it. Like I'm not scatterbrained. This is what I do. I'm good at it. So yeah.
Well, that's why I say it's interesting to hear you say, when I was mayor, people naturally went away. Their thought process went away from your primary business.
That's right.
Which is crazy. And you're like, well, it kind of hurt the business a little bit. I'm like, when you would think a public role like that would actually bring great attention or spotlight to the business.
Right. Yeah.
Not necessarily.
And I kind of thought that going in. Obviously, it's not why I did it, but and I think every mayor in Texas, essentially, I mean, even the big cities get paid almost nothing. I think the mayor of Fort Worth makes like $75 a year.
Okay.
Which, I mean, that is 100% a full-time job. Mayor of Southlake, I probably spent between 30 and 40 hours a week. It was a lot of time.
Yeah.
It was very much, I felt like that's what it required to do the job well, to be engaged, to come to the ribbon cuttings, to do the events and meet with constituents. And so, yeah, I mean, you sort of get into it thinking that if you're not intentional, to your point about pointing people to the right direction, you get into it thinking that, oh, well, I mean, people are going to be looking at me. It's going to be good. Like rising tide, lifts all ships. And it just wasn't. But, I'm not sure I would have done anything differently necessarily because again, like being mayor of Southlake, there are 35,000 people here. And everyone is in Southlake because they wanted to be, right? No one accidentally moved to Southlake. They're trying to get somewhere else and they just like settled on Southlake. Like you're here because you want to be, right? And they deserve excellence in everything, whether it's wealth management or construction or public servants.
Yeah.
So, I always wanted to respect that line too. I also never wanted to make it feel to anyone in this town that I was in public service to benefit the business. Right. And so I tried to really like keep them separate. Like the business is the business. This is, doesn't bleed over. So, I think it did hurt in general, like on balance. And some of it's political. It's just such a highly charged political environment.
Yeah.
I think I was mayor. It may have been right before I got. No, I was mayor. Or may have been running for mayor. We were bidding a job to some folks from California. I'll leave it at that. And I know so many good conservative Californians who have moved to this town.
Yeah.
So many. These folks maybe weren't on the conservative side, but we were in the middle of working a proposal and getting design work, and I have a designer on staff. She's not with my company anymore, but our designer at the time called me into her office and was like, oh, I think you should read this email. And this prospective client.
Oh man, you love those emails.
Oh my gosh. She explained to my designer in colorful language how horrible of a person I was and how she shouldn't be working for me and all this, and all political, right? It was nothing like we had barely even started the engagement. I was like, well, sorry you had to read that, and welcome to you're in the fishbowl with me, I guess. It was
wow.
Yeah, so there was some of that, not a ton. There was some of that, but it was a fun journey. I wouldn't change anything. I don't. Regret to me is not like it's never been impactful. Like I don't regret things, which I think that God kind of blessed me with that.
I know. It could be a good thing and a bad thing sometimes.
Right.
My wife is the correction on that. You're being a jerk right now.
Yeah, right.
I'm not being a jerk. Yes, you are. Okay, I'm sorry.
Got it. Okay. Mental note.
Yeah, seriously.
Don't do that again. But I feel like every if you're praying about your decisions and you're at the intersection of like the skills that God gives you and the opportunities that He gives you, then you're in the right spot. Whether it turns out exactly how you were hoping, I mean, you really don't have control over that. So.
Well, and there was a good thing I heard not too long ago was it was actually in my mastermind. The guy who leads that is in your business is you want to be a magnet. You want to attract. And I love this. And when I got this, it kind of flipped my thought process. It's like, well, I'm like, you want attractive people, you have to become attractive yourself.
True.
You can't sell to attractive people. I'm like, you might get some things, but you're not going to get awesome things. And so essentially you had to become this magnet. And in that, you got to remember that a magnet both attracts and repels. Right. And so
well said.
You attract what is you're supposed to have, but you repel the things that you're not supposed to.
So true.
Right. And so that was a big one that hit me, was like, okay, even if we have some of those situations, you're like, okay, that's not how I would have liked to hear it or receive it. Right. But there's also a protective piece of that. You're like, what are you supposed to get out of that?
No, I think those are great questions to ask yourself. Cause like, one thing, I sometimes stress too much, right? Just generalized anxiety. Like I don't struggle with depression. Thankfully, I don't struggle with, like acute like anxiety attacks or anything. But I'll just generalize the stress, right? And your brain gets to go in, and it's hard to stop it sometimes. But one of the things I've really tried to think about as the business, has its ups and downs, as politics has their ups and downs, stress with the family, is I'm trying to be a little bit more of a passive is not the right word, but maybe passive observer, more of an observer without initially ascribing negative or positive emotions or reactions to something that happens.
Right.
And because my thought is, if I believe that I'm on the path that I'm supposed to be, if I'm following God, if I'm making decisions based on His Word, based on my family and what's best for them, what happens in the course of that is, whether that's positive or negative is not really up to me, right? It's not. I mean, even if something feels negative, God can use it in a positive way. Or to your point, when you're starting to act like, what is this reinforcing? What can I learn out of it? You can turn a negative situation into a positive. So just wanted to be, for me, I'm trying to be more of an observer. Like, okay, I'm not going to stress about this. I'm not going to have anxiety about this. It's an opportunity to learn, or it's something that God's going to use to push me further down the path He wants me to be on, versus immediately taking this and saying, oh, it's negative, I want to stress about it,
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think especially anybody who's running the business, they've gotten an email, a call, some news like that, where it's just, you sink.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, when I've gotten those, I guess it's interesting to see. And we talked about this in Message at Church or something, is like, your speed of obedience is a direct indicator of your maturity. And I think of that in the same way, right? So if you send me an email that's damning me or attacking or whatever, and it's one of those sinking emails, or maybe you got to break bad news, right? That it's your fault or whatever, and you got to do that. And okay, I got to answer this now, but I got to also take a moment to make sure I'm not answering emotionally and doing something else to make it worse.
So true.
Right? Like, let me collect my thoughts for a moment, but also know that I have a clock that I have to respond to this on and get to it and not avoid.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really good, because the observer mentality forces that a little bit.
Right.
Right. Instead of being a reactor.
Right.
Yeah.
Like observe and process. Yeah, that's a good point. I like the way you put that, though. It's a sign of maturity, how you process it, the speed at which you get to that point, versus spinning out emotionally and freaking out about it and letting it ruin half a day or a day, right? Because you're a family man, you're an entrepreneur, like, you don't have half a day to stress about something.
No. Yeah.
Like, you can't let an external, a sinking email, as you put it so well, you can't let that ruin your day. You've got employees, you've got kids, you've got a wife, like, you've got people, your clients depending on you, to not get spun out by every little negative thing. And I've always greatly admired folks who can process that stuff quickly and not let it crash them, And I think, just in the political context, how you see presidents or governors, like high executive roles, and you think about the the amount of insanity they must get on a day-to-day basis. Like imagine reading the president's daily briefing with all of the insanity.
Crazy.
Oh my gosh. And how you have to process that and then go give a speech to the, to the elementary school and everything. Like you can't stress about everything, right? I guess you internalize it and they all turn gray.
Yeah.
But yeah, you gotta, figure out how to process it, observe it, and move on and be present for the rest of your day. It's tough to do.
It's not easy. That's for sure. Dude, what's the biggest thing you're excited for right now? You got a big opportunity or something you're trying to go after, or like you guys trying to double revenue, or what's your big thing?
Well, so I'll give you one family, one business. On the business, I'm also starting to do some consulting, like in some real estate and land development. So
Okay.
that's been super fun.
Nice.
I deal with a lot of that, or I dealt with a lot of it on city council, right? You deal with development cases, and I'm starting to get some calls from landowners who are just asking like, hey, what can I, how can I develop my land, or how can I work through the process? And so getting to help them out on a consulting basis has been super fun. So we're kind of diving into that a little bit too. Different vectors, similar skill set. On the family side, my oldest is graduating high school in 2 weeks.
Dude, come on.
I'm just processing that.
Yeah,
too.
I didn't even want to. We're going to Chris's daughter's graduation party tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's like a glimpse into the future. I don't want it right now.
No.
I feel for you guys, right?
Bro, they all say it happens way too fast, and you don't believe them until you're there, and you're like, oh, that went way too fast, bro. Because your oldest is 6, 7?
10.
10.
We have 10, 5, and 1.
10, 5, 1. That's
right
right.
now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just happens too fast. It's crazy, and we're looking back through all the pictures, and you're like, okay, you're launching out in the world. I hope I didn't screw this one up.
Okay.
But it's been fun, man. It's been really fun.
That's awesome. That's cool. Do this as we kind of wrap up. If you could look back on your business, family, all of it wrapped up, right? But especially, let's talk to you at day one, or a guy at day one, or any entrepreneur at day one of this thing, as they're trying to build their family, their business, something awesome. What would you tell them starting out that you wish you knew that would be a no-brainer today?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think if I had to boil it down to one thing, it would be don't get too high or too low. Kind of what we're talking about, reacting and processing the negative news. Don't get too high and don't get too low. I mean, nothing better than making a sale, getting a new client, thinking you're on top of the world, or opening a new office or hiring a new employee. It's so fun. So those highs are so high. It's fun. But then the emails that make you sink, or the phone calls are just so or an employee quits, or you have to fire someone. I mean, that's just devastating. That would be what I would tell myself 10 years ago. Like, don't get too high, don't get too low, right? The low stuff is hard, but tomorrow will be a better day. Yeah. The high stuff is super fun, but don't rest on your laurels. Because as you know, that's also, dangerous for entrepreneurs is, I just, closed a new deal, or hired a new great rock star. I can take my foot off the gas. It's like, man, woe to the entrepreneur that, thinks they've got it all figured out. Everything's perfect, because, tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah. Well, planning never stops.
No, true.
Right? I mean, it's you plant and harvest, and sometimes the harvest is small, sometimes big, and cash flow is big, awesome sometimes, and we got to take advantage of that, and sometimes it's bad. We get, even though we have a conservative leadership in office right now, we have some clients that are still super concerned about the tariffs, about potential recession, they were like, I've seen the last one and how it hit. And so it's a real thought process. And I tell you what, that's softened even me to a lot of that conversation is hearing that, right? Because there's people that are right down in the middle. Like, I voted this way or that way, but I got concerns about the person that I voted for too.
That's right.
And so that's really interesting. But I appreciate that, because we've all been at that place, especially at the very beginning, right? You're excited to get the sale, and then guess what? You got to refund the sale.
Yep, been there.
And so your income that just came in from that just went away,
Yep.
or you have a debit due back that you have to pay through the next one. And you're like, that hurts.
Yeah.
So it's also a good lesson on spending your money, right? Like don't go blowing it.
That's so true.
Don't book the Disney trip right after you get an awesome sale.
No,
because you're going to have to.
No doubt. Yeah. Like, just on the business side, someone, I'm a salesperson, right? I'm sales focused. I want to, celebrate this. I want to spend all my time on the sales and say, and somebody a couple of years into it sat me down and said, you don't make your money in sales. You make your money on the production side. It's like, oh shoot, that's so true. Cause I get the sale. I'm like, okay, I plug it into my pro forma, look at the quarter. It's really great. Like, you didn't make a dime, buddy. You make it in the production. That's where you need to be focused. That's when you make your money. I was like, man, it's a mindset shift for someone who's more sales oriented and wants to leave the production details to the other people,
I get it. I get it.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like, this is where you make your money. This is great, but that's not real money yet.
Yeah. No, there was a development phase for me, big time. I don't think you're ever out of that. If you're not growing, you're dying, right? But
100%.
there was what I do love is especially as the owner role is, every minimum or threshold you kind of set as your next. And I'll tell you, like, I remember when we set a minimum $1 million for us in investable assets. In order to come on as a client, Pro Capital, you had to have this at minimum.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it was hard because all of a sudden, all these people who were at $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 were coming in, and I would have taken them in the blink of an eye before, right? And I'm like, man, if I'm a man of my word, I said this, so I got to stick to it, and especially the people that I told it to. Otherwise, you water down your word.
That's right.
And so, or respect would be lost. And so, but what was so great about it, it forced me, one, to say no to these, but it forced me to rise to this level, which, now some of those you hand off to other advisors, where I'm there along the onboarding process. But it was cool because, my intent, we'll keep that threshold at the firm, but I'm going to increase that to $3 million at the new year. Right.
That's
and
awesome.
So it was basically like, some of my mentors, where their minimums are 10 million.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, heck, I want that, right? And so that's it. But
it's a leap of faith right?
Totally. It's like you're forcing yourself to develop to be that.
True. So true.
Right?
Yeah. Set the goals and shoot for it. And I also think that's a good lesson in entrepreneurship, was just what you're describing. It's like, if you want to be here, like your mentors with a $10 million minimum, well, then you've got to be intentional about working that way. And sometimes you draw lines but stay with it. Because if you don't take that $1 million or $3 million step, you're never going to get to the $10 million, right?
Right.
And but yeah, it was a leap of faith, I'm sure, for you. It's like, well, is this going to work? Can I make it? Can I make it happen?
Well, it's way better than I ever thought it would be.
Yeah.
And I still remember, one of our advisors, he was like, man, because I told him, you come on board here, you have that minimum. He's like, yeah, but there's a lot of people with a lot less that, is good opportunity and could need help. And I'm like, yes, they're awesome. That's not who we're serving right now.
Yep.
And it was a big leap of faith. And I've had people that came, some stayed, some left.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
And so that and my hard coaching. Sometimes I'm like, Megan's, she's like, this isn't a locker room. She's like, this isn't football.
Do you go full Parcells on
I'm
something?
like, oh man, my looks he gives you. And I'm like, because I'll get that sometimes. He asks a stupid question, and I'm like, think about that.
Yeah. One more time.
Think one more time. Yeah.
Say it again slow.
Dude, I love you, man.
Love
I
you
love your
too, buddy.
family. And I'm so thankful for you coming on.
Oh, brother, thanks. It was a great conversation, man. I appreciate you sharing your wisdom. This is really good.
Heck yeah. Thanks, brother. Oh, dude, one thing before we sign off.
Yeah.
Where can people go to find you or find the business and check you out?
Yeah. Black Door Innovation is the website, blackdoorinnovation.com. JohnHuffman.com is my personal, but I don't think I've updated it since the political stuff. So ignore everything you see on the website, but I'm sure I'll update it at some point.
I'm going to go steal your handle and start posting.
It was a joy when I saw that was available. I was right before I ran for mayor. I was like, oh, bye.
It's awesome. Thanks, brother.
Hey, man. Great conversation.
Heck yeah.